Joining me now is Erik Prince, a former Navy SEAL, the founder of Blackwater, the former firm that had faced years of investigations for its role in Iraq. It no longer exists. He has now launched a new security organization, and he's pushing for the privatization of the war in Afghanistan. Mr. Prince, thank you. Thank you
Thanks for having
being
me.
Here. What would be the advantages of privatizing, given all the objections from the Pentagon, from the State Department, from the rest of the military?
First of all, privatization is a loaded term, right?
Okay.
Right now there's 15,000 U.S. troops and another 30,000 contractors. All I need, my plan would say 2,000 U.S. Special Forces remain and about 6,000 contractors. So by any stretch, that is a severe reduction in manpower and certainly in spending. Right now, America this year, 2019, will spend $62 billion just in Afghanistan. That's more than the entire UK defense budget. So if people are concerned about domestic spending or budget deficits, or the fact that we have Americans dying, fighting and dying there now, as recently as last week, who were infants when the Twin Towers came down, we now have our first multi-generational war, and I'm trying to get a rationalization of it. What worked after 9/11 were a few CIA officers, a few special forces, and some air support, and they devastated the Taliban in a matter of weeks. When we shifted 6 months after 9/11 to a very conventional battle plan, effectively repeating what the Soviet battle plan was in the 1980s, we have been losing ever since. We've been losing blood and treasure, and just as recently as this week, when you have 4 simultaneous attacks across the country, killing 350 Afghans and blowing up 50 kids in Kabul who are studying for exams, that is not what winning looks like.
Well, despite the fact that Secretary Pompeo was there last month saying that we are making good progress, there are all sorts of arguments from the Pentagon that they're making progress. Let me share with you some criticism of your plan.
Sure.
Sean McFate in Politico magazine, I'm sure you've seen this, he is a piece called "I Was a Mercenary, Trust Me, Erik Prince's Plan is Garbage." Tough words. Prince is an amateur and makes rookie mistakes, which is probably why the generals laughed at him. Somehow he believes 6,000 mercenaries in a small air force can solve Afghanistan's problems. This is magical thinking. NATO could not succeed with 140,000 troops 8 years ago when the Taliban was in retreat.
Sure.
To give you a chance to respond.
Easy. In the days after 9/11, if we can remember back that far, 17 years ago, you had the National Security Cabinet huddled at Camp David. And the best the Pentagon came up with was missiles, bombing, and a conventional invasion through Pakistan with 40,000 people, and they didn't want to do it while the Pentagon was still smoldering for another 6 months. So again, a conventional plan that didn't work then and still hasn't worked versus a small unconventional plan does work. Every Special Forces officer I talk to, if you ask them honestly, they'll say that is the approach that works. They might not like my plan specifically, but small and unconventional and living with and working with the Afghans is the only way to do it. Now, so the United States, right, we've been sending troops there for 17 years. They send them for 6, 7, 8 months, maybe a year. Those troops spend the first few months getting to learn the area, a few months very productive, the last couple months making sure everybody comes home. And then we lift that unit out, send them home, and send a new one in with no continuity.
Well,
and we've done that 30 times now.
But we have been sending people back for recurring tours, which is another whole issue.
That's like working in Miami versus working in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, some
totally
of them stay in the same area. But let me ask you this. What about oversight? What about, you know, the chain of command? If you had private... Now, right now, you do have one company for private security that is licensed in Hong Kong. You train in a rented facility in Beijing. You've graduated at least 5,000 from there already.
Oh, no, not the company that I have anything to do with. Has not done anything like that. No.
Oh, according to...
We've graduated...
according to
probably
their
20 or 30 employees.
According
maybe
to
the school is the school has
the
prior
school's
to our
promotional materials claims that
prior to our involvement. Sure. Look.
In November, when you were giving them a commencement message on Skype.
Correct. Those were those are the first 20 company employees. That's it. Anyway, going back to Afghanistan. The problem is we have no continuity of troops. So we have, again, they deploy and they.
But there is
leave.
a chain of command.
Of course there's a chain of command. And the same would there be a chain of command. If we believe in empowering the Afghans, putting contractors that live with, train with, and fight with their Afghan counterparts under Afghan rules of engagement. If we really, as the United States, want to stand up the Afghan government as a sovereign force, putting a structural support that supports the Afghan units in the field, not from a headquarters, but in the field, wherever those units are. Just this week, okay, you had multiple Afghan units that were run over and in some cases didn't get air support for 3 and 4 days until they were finally surrendered or slaughtered. This approach fixes that.
How
It
do
is
you
not
get-
a
how do you get
privatization.
your
It is not a
message?
private army. It is a very clear delineation of who's in charge, okay? Afghan government working for a U.S. government official funded by the United States at a fraction of the cost
would
of
it
what we're
cost?
spending now. All up, this is about a $3.5 billion package, saving more than 52 billion.
Let me ask you, how do you get your message through to the president? Steve Bannon's no longer inside. Do you have others advocating for you? Is Don Jr. involved? Is Jared involved?
Look, the president was right to campaign against endless wars. I think any president, any candidate,
But
right,
how
left,
do
or
you
center,
get your message to him? Because he's going to have to overrule Jim Mattis for this to happen.
if we leave decisions on warfare solely to the Pentagon, we will be at war forever.
Well-
We'll be here 17 years. You'll long since be retired, and we'll still be fighting in Afghanistan. Then we'll have our grandchildren going to Afghanistan. Enough is enough. Let's rationalize that the president's original instincts were correct. He should have gone with them. And now we're another $62 billion spent. $62 billion that we have to create and sell in debt because we don't have it.
Let
as
me
a
ask you
country.
about your own record, because we know about Blackwater, but you've been questioned by the Mueller team. You've testified to the House Intelligence Committee about this meeting. The issue being raised is whether or not you, during the transition, just before the inaugural, were meeting in the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean with a prominent Russian connected to Vladimir Putin, whether this was a back channel. I want to just get you to respond.
No, it's certainly not a
to
back
that
channel,
whole-
and I've been very clear, and I think the House
What was the
transcript-
meeting about?
The House transcript was released, and people can read it if they want to. It was an incidental meeting, and I had no follow-up with them since then, not before or after.
Now, it's your sister who is the education secretary in the cabinet, and you were a big campaign contributor. Is she helping you with this
Not at all.
entree?
No.
Are you offended by the way the president, according to Omarosa's book and her interviews, talks about people like your sister with nicknames, Ditzy, DeVos? Isn't that rude, dismissive of a woman?
I've been traveling abroad, and I really don't follow the day-to-day political comings and goings in America. I worry about bigger things.
Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Erik Prince, thanks for being with us today.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.